Hi, I'm Reg Harbeck, and today I'm here with Milt Rosberg, who is the Global VP for Sales, Marketing, and Business Development for Vanguard. Welcome, Milt.
Well, thanks for the invite.
So now you have a really interesting background with Vanguard and just the history of mainframe security. Maybe if we could start by just giving a sense of how you ended up where you and Vanguard are at.
Yeah, it's a long road. I've been in the technology business for many years. I was on the hardware side, working with companies like Tandem Computers, and Verifone, and Symbol Technologies. So I was involved in a lot of network kind of stuff. And then when Console came to the United States, I worked with them and helped bring that to the US market. And then when they went through a VC round, they finally ended up with IBM. I ended up with Ron Bailey and Vanguard after a few years. So I think that started around 99, and around 2001 or 2 or so in that time frame, I ended up working with Vanguard.
So now Vanguard, as being in a big part of the mainframe ecosystem, per the banner behind you since 1986, maybe you can just give us a sense of the role that Vanguard has played in mainframe computing security, just from its inception until its current role.
Yeah, I really think it goes back to Mr. Bailey's principles of how we need to deliver to the marketplace what the mainframe could do for security, how it should be handling security, think about security. And he really developed the concept of having a security conference. We had the security training, professional services, and producing product. And all those worked in parallel or together so that we would be able to deliver services to the company that were trying to achieve security, not only with the software tools, but the educational part of it, and the ability to go on site and provide consulting advice and pen testing and remediation and so forth. So their systems got more secure via tools and consulting.
So cybersecurity is a whole lot more than just software solutions, it sounds like. Maybe if you can kind of draw a picture of what is cybersecurity these days?
Well, if you take a look at the news recently, the amount of information that's getting removed from on-premise secure locations. Just think about what happened with the Pentagon, and where an individual, an insider or attack actually took information and passed it to the world and put it on the internet. So cybersecurity is really dangerous for corporations that don't have the right things in play and the right security put in place to keep both inside users, the inside attack, and the perimeter attack for people trying to get the information, whether that's information about your account, information about your locations, or information that's being by persistent threats, advanced persistent threats by nation states. It's real important you secure your systems to protect the information.
Well, part of the security is obviously not just the protection, but then the afterward dealing with things and then the ability to do so with, for example, insurance. Maybe if you could talk a bit about what are the implications, especially for the mainframe, of cybersecurity insurance.
Yeah, that's a big space right now. That's a lot of discussion. I think in December last year, the CEO of Zurich put out an article talking about how cybersecurity could be uninsurable, because how do you protect against it? Which caused a couple of ripples in the marketplace for other people commenting. In my opinion, we could end up with a situation where the insurance rates keep going up and up and up and higher. I believe they've leveled off a little bit, but it's a space that's really concerning to the people that have to pay for it. It rises to the intention of the board. One of the things they want to make sure is they're safe, the information being protected. They don't end up with things like stockholder lawsuit. They don't want the stock price to drop. And they want to make sure they have the proper insurance coverage to take care of any violations they may have against their system. And we're a small company. And for us, the insurance rates have gone up drastically for cybersecurity insurance. And the number of players in the market space is reduced. So you have a couple of things working against you for cybersecurity insurance. It's very possible this is just my personal opinion, that you could end up with a reinsurance kind of a program where multiple insurance companies would have to get together to support the possible loss you could have inside of corporations and some way to cover that.
Now, given that the wide range of different types of security coverage, and thinking back to the origins of mainframe security in terms of RACF, ACF2, which were both created in the 70s, and Top Secret created in the early 1980s, you take a look at the fact that Vanguard was there shortly thereafter in 86.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about how Vanguard, what did Vanguard add to the level of business and mainframe security?
So it's interesting how we have grown with the demand. We started out with administrative tools. And the idea was, you know what, we'll make it easier. You don't use the panels. You have just plain panels on how you're going to do it, how you can perform administration. And it was all focused on RACF at that particular time, maybe like cloning users and doing things that they helped us to make it easier. So it was operational efficiency for administration. And then the next part was, well, we should report on that. So then they built a tool called Advisor, and that did the reporting that you would have that you would need to for operations to see what's happening, who's looking at what. Then they said, you know, we need to make sure our security is good, and the audit department wants to find out what's going on, so let's build another tool. Then they built something called Analyzer, which would take you through the system and find the weaknesses that need to be taken care of. That was 3 tools. And that was basically the 3 tools that were brought Vanguard to the place that it was at in like 2000, 2001, 2002. Today, Vanguard has over 40 solutions if you put them all together. We have 30 hard individual solutions. So that's a big difference. And we started out in just RACF, and now we do ACF2 and Top Secret. That was driven by the marketplace. A lot of our large financial institutions and insurance companies said we want to have a common interface between all of our external security managers. We want to be able to do reporting across all those. We have compliance requirements. So as the market has changed, let's say from 2000 to this year, it's gone through a lot of regulations. There are so many rules. I don't know how many rules there are for these poor companies. There's got to be 20, 30 different kinds of rules depending on the state. So you have to have automated ways that you can produce information to meet the compliance requirements and the regulations and the audit requirements. So that's really one of the reasons we've had to expand our offering to the marketplace, is because our customers, those very same customers that started out with 3 or 4 tools back in 97, 98, 2000, 2001, have come to us and said, you know, we need to be able to do a compliance check. Do you have something that can do that? And so we built the tools to help them do the same thing, improve operational efficiency, and give them the information they need.
One of the things that Vanguard has obviously been a key participant in is the fact that the mainframe, really almost from its inception, has became and remained the system of record for the most essential information in the world economy. Maybe if you could talk about some of the aspects of security innovation over the past few decades that have been essential to it retaining that trusted role.
Yeah, it's been driven to that. You just take a look at the compliance requirements, like baseline requirements that we did in like 2008 and 9 with the DISA stakes, which is now the NIST. And you take a look at all the GDPR requirements, and the list goes on of all those requirements. That's really a system of record, because the auditors want to go, they want to take a look and see what you run the baseline, it gives you the results show gaps. People have too much access, as an example. You reduce the access, and that's a record. And now what do? You have to do the remediation. You want to show you have the remediation so that they're happy with that. The external auditor says, oh, I want to see that report. Then the next part of that is, how do you make sure you don't have that problem in the future? So you implement a thing that says, well, this is now a policy. We need to have the software capability or a tool where we can automate that the policy is locked down and it protects the information. So when you go back and look again to see, when you run a baseline scan as an example, and the results come back, we did the remediation, it's locked down, it's now a system of record. that we have this thing in shape like it should be. And that's what really is driving the requirements for the mainframe, to make sure that it's giving the right information at the right time and it can be relied on from an audit perspective. And that's the external auditors and the internal auditors. Let's say like Deloitte comes in, they say, well, we want to make sure the access is correct here and that nobody has excess access. And they ask for and they're looking at it on the mainframe. I still think today it's probably doing 70, 80% of the operations, at least for the Fortune 100. And there's a move to take some of the applications off, but it's going to be a while. It's still the big machine that's running the critical infrastructure of the United States and of the world.
Well, as we take a look at that, it's sort of interesting. The mainframe has sort of become the de facto incumbent in ways that I think very few people expected, even including the people who created the original mainframe didn't expect it to last as long. And now it's got this indefinite vector. Taking a look at some of the risk and security innovations that are going to be needed today and into the future, including interacting with some of the amazing innovations that IBM's introduced into the actual platform. What are your thoughts about that?
If you go back in history, there's an interesting presentation that at Share that we had about the original mainframe, how it was developed and how NASA was involved in it. And you take a look at where it's grown and the amount of resilience that it's had. So, the mainframe is, I think, the most securable platform that's out there in the marketplace. It is the most securable. The effectiveness of securing it and making sure that you have the right resources put in the right place at the right time to get it secured, that's the challenge. And the challenge that Vanguard has with our customers and our prospects, and we get on these calls every day, they've had these systems installed for 20, 30 years. We go in and do an assessment. We find all kinds of weak spots for it. We have the ability to take complete control of their system in a very short period of time. It's not their fault. The CISO looks at it or the executive looks at it. They say, we've never had a problem with it. It's perfectly safe. We don't have to worry about it. Let's take our budget money and spend it on the perimeter. And here the mainframe sits there chugging away and all these applications are still working. And then they find out when everybody leaves because of retirement or whatever, they say, well, we should do an assessment. Let's find out what's going on with our system. Lo and behold, they have all these holes in the system that need to be repaired. So that's part of the most securable part. And we're at a place, I think, in history on the mainframe that we need to secure these guys. We really need to make sure they're well secured. I was reading an article this morning about artificial intelligence and how you can take this new chat capability with artificial intelligence and build malware with this capability. We're going to start having attacks at new vectors that we haven't even thought about. And when you start taking artificial intelligence and you're putting it up against these systems, they're going to get in. And we need to make sure that the mainframe is secured as it can be and securable. It's a big challenge for the industry because you have a couple things that are working against us. One, the resources that know the systems are leaving and retiring and they're not available. And we have to bring the tools up to speed quickly so that when you put them on the systems, they can do things like check for malware and understand what has to happen on the mainframe. And we're able to protect the information and data.
So maybe you can talk a bit both about the fundamentals that every mainframe shop should have in place and specifically about the gaps that they really need to be closing that are often not properly addressed but could and should be.
It's not uncommon to, we have a piece of software that we run and it's called Vanguard Compliance Manager, and we're asked to bring it in when we do an assessment. It's one of the very first pieces of software we load onto the system form, and we run that just to check the standard compliance. And it comes up with a lot of findings right off the bat. We haven't even touched it. And other vendors provide similar capability on open systems architecture, some on the mainframe. They have different ways that they do it, but they all come back fundamentally with the same results. There's a lot of open doors in the system that need to be taken care of. When we go in and do an assessment, we find on the open system side, on the Z side, like Z Linux as an example, There's doors in there that you can take from that and get on the ZOS side into applications. And that's quite frequently ignored. Part of that is because there's always been this space between the open systems architecture and the ZOS architecture. We've watched it in mainframe shops. You go in and say, oh, I want to bring a PC in here and do this particular thing. The mainframe folks that are married to the mainframe, they said, we don't want to have anything to do with that. And you sit in the same room with the open systems guys, they go, I don't want anything to do that. I'm not involved with the mainframe. Well, those gaps are being bridged quickly, and they have to be, because the information has to flow cleanly between the two of them. And you can't have a space between those two organizations where you could have potential gaps that could be used to mine those systems and create a place for exfiltration.
As you talk about the gaps between the mainframe and open systems, I think that's one of the big challenges we have in the mainframe is that people take the mainframe strengths for granted and assume open systems have the same strengths. Maybe if you could talk about some of the things that are invisible strengths the mainframe has that are essential but completely absent from open systems.
Yeah, I think the big one is the way the external security managers work. You take a look at what RACF, ACF2, and Top Secret, those external security managers are powerful. They operate differently, but the design was all fundamentally the same. You have to have access to an external security manager. You need to be an authorized person or authorized access to look at information. And it's just the way it's architected. And the mainframe is built to run. It's happy at 90%. It loves going fast. And you take a lot of this open systems architecture, they're not real happy at 50. And so, so it's just a complete different architectural design. Of those firms that we work with that are thinking about going to open systems architecture or even talking to them about having on-premise applications, maybe cloud applications, the first thing they ask us is how are we going to ensure that we have the same level of security in these new platforms or new places we're going to go, the cloud, wherever that is. How are we going to make sure that we have the same level of security that we have now with RACF as an example, when we go to some application in the cloud and we move this application over? The critical infrastructure cannot afford to have it in the cloud and have it hacked and not have it protected. And I think that's the real big challenge. I mean, I just don't see where you're going to be taking stockholder applications and putting them in the cloud without making sure your security is in a strong place. So those are the kind of things that we're faced with as a company. How can we make sure that we're helping them in the right direction as they move from on-premise into the cloud?
Well, one of the things that sort of becomes evident as one of the challenges on the journey is avoiding the vicious circle and staying in the virtuous circle, avoiding the downward spirals and getting into the upward spiral. And I'm wondering if you can sort of talk about some of the experiences that you've had about that, and specifically ways that Vanguard helps people move into and stay in the virtuous cycle.
The place that this gets confused is with a CISO. If you take a look at the structures that are going on today, and there's a lot of articles about who the CISO should report to. And I think what's happened in the past, the CISO was reporting sometimes to the CIO, sometimes to the CEO. And when the CIO, his responsibility is to make sure that all the operations in their facilities are running fast. They don't have a problem. People have access. You go to the ATM, you want $200, you get $200. As a user, you don't care where the $200 comes from. You go to the ATM, you want a fast cash for $200. You don't care if your system's in the cloud, it's on premise, or a combination of those things. So that's what you're mostly concerned about as a user. And the operation side, that's what they're concerned about. The people that are building the applications for the end user to go and get the $200, they want to make sure it's easy to use, friendly, it supports 5 different languages, and you can get your money quickly. The CISO, on the other side, he's very concerned about making sure that the person that's asking for the $200 is actually the person that should be getting the $200. And he's making sure there's no gaps in that whole network that allow them to get into the system and exfiltrate any other data, or block it up, or exfiltrate data that doesn't belong to them, or does it have a backdoor? So it's the funneling of how do you get those two different principles to work together, make the client happy, and avoid any kind of problems with your system as far as having data exfiltrated. It's a tightrope walk for these people. I did a presentation recently, and I showed you have like this giant canyon and a rope across the canyon, and a gentleman with a pole walking across the canyon. And on the left-hand side of the canyon was operational efficiency. And on the right-hand side of the canyon was having effective security. And they have to walk this tightrope because they have to give the customer what he wants. But at the same side, you have to protect the integrity of the information for the customer at the end of the day.
So given that, in thinking about the organizations that need this, maybe if you can talk about the organizations, types of organizations that care about the mainframe security and the solutions that Vanguard has to offer.
We go to a lot of events, and they're up on our website. You can look at the ones we go to. It's not a secret that you're recording. When we go to share as an example, and that's the right word for it, you're talking to professionals that have been in business 25, 30 years, some less than that. They're on the system side mostly that we end up talking with. Their awareness of making sure that they have their data protected and their security is so much greater than any other time that I've seen, like the last 3 or 4 years. They're coming in really well-schooled. They understand the sensitivity of it and the importance of protecting the information. So that's like one group. Then another group that we spend a fair amount of time with is the executive level. That's the CISOs and the operational people. I've had cases where we've met with them. They've had situations that I can't go into excruciating detail about, but maybe they hired a company to come in and do some work for them. They weren't vetted correctly. They plant code in their system that could have potential problems. And then it finally gets exposed and they had a series of problems. So, it's back to the very fundamentals of keeping the system safe and secure. This is a problem that's gone on for a long time. People want to feel secure in their systems, and it's forefront on their mind. You log onto your PC in the morning. One of the very first things that I do with my home PC is I run all those scans to make sure that even though they're automated, I go back and rerun them again. When you're on the mainframe side, you've got to make sure that everything is where it belongs. And when they sit down and they tell you something, you go through like an assessment, and you go through maybe the findings of the assessment. We rank them whether they're severe or not, or whether they're moderate, or whether they're not moderate. And when you go through the severe findings, we have been on calls with clients where the CISO is on the phone and we're going through these severe findings. He says, this call is terminated. I have to take care of this immediately. He's on with his peers. So it's a situation I think that's could be in more systems. We don't know. But the other people that are in the industry that we speak with, they talk about the same situation where we're uncovering things that need to be taken care of that before on the mainframe side were considered okay, but now they're not okay because this gives them the ability to do stuff on the mainframe from a way to remove data.
So now if we take a look at all these things they have to address, obviously there are also people who are provoking this. You think on the one hand, we all think of hackers and rogue states and criminal organizations, but on the other hand, we've got, regulatory requirements. We've got politicians who don't know necessarily what they're talking about. And we have, of course, auditors. Maybe you can talk about the various parties that provoke a sense of urgency in these matters.
Yeah, for me, it's the nation states. We take a look at the nation states, you take a look at the countries that are really not our friends anymore and getting stronger and creating new alliances. I get a little frightened when you see China and Russia together. They have advanced persistent threats that go on all the time. And you start taking a look at the artificial intelligence capability, we have our hands full. And the advanced persistent threat from these countries is unbelievable. They have college campuses full of individuals. The whole goal is to hack into our systems. And they're doing it. And the mainframe is a target. I mean, so who's the guy that robbed banks? They said, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. The technique is the same. If I'm going to rob the data, if I'm going to get information on how to build airplanes, I'm certainly going to go to Lockheed Martin, or I'm going to go to the federal systems or the Department of Defense and steal as much data as I can get, because we're the best in the world. And so those are the nation states that are coming after our information. It's critical that we protect our data and protect our systems. Just it's trillions of dollars, $1 trillion industry for stealing credit card information. It's not a minor thing. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but there's a lot of information on the internet about it. We did a presentation at Share, I think 3 years ago. It was brought up about how there's trillions of dollars of business to steal credit card information. Well, why would they go and steal credit card information? That's right. That's where the money is, because it's a whole other industry. And we need to be aware of it. It's tough. It's a tough time right now for people to feel safe physically. That's my personal opinion. And also to make sure that the data is safe. And it's responsibility for these organizations. They have a fiduciary and moral responsibility to make sure that the data is taken care of and safe, and nobody can get to it and do serious things with it.
This has been really informative and interesting and compelling, Milt. Any closing thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. Every time I meet with a CISO and we have serious business discussions, the first thing that runs through my mind is, how can we get our message better? And there's a lot of really good companies doing a lot of good messaging about this. I just think it's the people that are responsible for the systems. They have so much money they can spend on it. The money they're spending on security is increasing every single year, so it's not like they're not paying attention to it. So it's a balancing act. I mean, what is risk avoidance? How much risk are you willing to take? How much does it come off the bottom line? And how do we charge for it? How do we spend for it? I think as the vendors like us and the other ones that are in the industry, we need just to educate the people at the top to make the right decision for their organization, to help them improve their posture, and so they can deliver a really good message to the people that are investing in the company, the stockholders, and in the federal system and the state agencies. They just have got to tighten it up. And you talked about politics before. They've got to be able to move the regulations through quickly and get the systems in place so they're tight, and so they can help the whole general public. So that's really my closing argument. And last, if you're not educated, one of our things about conferences, knowledge is the best defense. You got to get the people in your organization, whether you go to a Vanguard conference or other conferences, you've got to do continual education, because after some number of months, what you're learning goes away, and you need to bring it back and reinforce it to make sure that you're doing the right thing to keep these people up to speed.